imagine stepping out onto the pitch at the World Cup.
Yeah.
You look to your left, and there's a teammate who was literally born a month after the 2008 collapse of Lehman Brothers.
Right. Just a kid.
Exactly, just a kid. And then you look to your right, and there is a 40-year-old veteran who played in the 2006 tournament. On paper, that makes absolutely zero sense.
Yeah, traditional sports logic tells you the ultimate competitive stages are supposed to be rigid. There are these unwritten rules about who gets to play or, like, what age peak performance looks like.
And maybe even more importantly, who gets to sit behind the microphone and dictate the narrative off the pitch.
Oh, totally. Those unwritten rules have basically functioned as the laws of physics for decades. I mean, you don't put a teenager in the middle of a high-stakes World Cup knockout scenario.
No.
And you certainly don't hand the reins of a multi-billion-dollar sports media machine over to a demographic that, well, traditional networks have historically just ignored.
Right. But if you are the type of learner who loves tracking how massive societal shifts happen in real time, today's deep dive is for you. Because we're looking at a stack of sources this week that prove those traditional gatekept barriers in the sports world they're completely shattering.
They really are.
We're weaving together on the ground match reports and predictive AI data from the 2026 World Cup, specifically Mexico's historic run and Czechia's dramatic exit, with some really fascinating industry analysis on the explosive growth of women's sports podcasts.
And the through line connecting, a soccer match in Mexico City to a podcast studio in New York is the psychology of the modern fan. We are witnessing this massive transfer of ownership.
But a total changing of the guard.
Exactly. The old guard is being replaced on the field by entirely new tactical philosophies. And off the field, a $30 billion media landscape is being completely rewired by former female athletes who are finally taking control of their own stories.
So let's start with the catalyst on the pitch. June 24th, 2026. The World Cup Group A finale at Estadio Azteca. Mexico just dismantling Czechia in a 3-yard rout.
An absolute masterclass.
It really was. The goals come from Mateo Chavez in the 55th minute, Julian Quiñones in the 61st, and then Alvaro Fidalgo hammering it home deep into stoppage time, like 90+4.
Yeah, the final nail in the coffin.
Right. And by the final whistle, Mexico had topped their group with a flawless record and 0 goals conceded. Meaning not a single team scored against them in the group stage.
Which is huge.
It's their first perfect clean sheet group stage since 1970.
And to understand how a team actually achieves that level of dominance, you have to look at the managerial collision happening on the sidelines.
The two coaches.
Right. Javier Aguirre, Mexico's manager, he came into this tournament just obsessing over mental endurance. He implemented this incredibly demanding, almost grueling psychological training program specifically to forge a steel-minded squad.
Which they needed, right. Because they didn't look great at first.
No, they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
During the first 20 minutes against Czechia, Mexico looked really shaky. They were absorbing heavy pressure. But they didn't panic.
Yeah.
They simply weathered the storm, recalibrated, and then completely suffocated the game.
Contrast that with the other dugout. You have Czechia's manager, Miroslav Kubek, who is 74 years old. And after this catastrophic 3-0 loss, he's totally defiant.
Well, he was doubling down.
Yeah. He brings up his contract, insists he isn't resigning, and immediately shifts the blame to, quote, stupid mistakes from his players in the second half.
Which is just wild management.
Right. And when we cross-reference that post-match reaction with the AI data models run before the game, this outcome wasn't a fluke at all. The AI highlighted a massive pedigree mismatch. Mexico is ranked 15th globally with 17 World Cup appearances.
And Czechia is ranked 41st.
Right.
The AI also flagged a critical tactical vulnerability. Czechia was relying heavily on this really rigid 5-man defensive block.
Okay, let's unpack this. Aguirre built a defensive fortress, obviously, with 0 goals conceded in the tournament so far. But Kubek basically handed him the keys to the match by benching his elite stars like Patrick Schick and Tomáš Souček for this crucial game.
Yeah, a baffling decision.
So is Mexico actually an unstoppable force right now, or did Czechia just completely implode structurally?
Honestly, the implosion was baked right into Kubek's tactics. A 5-man backline literally means placing 5 defenders tightly across the penalty area. It's a strategy designed purely to survive.
Just park in the bus.
Exactly. And it naturally invites the opposing team to push all their attackers forward. Now, Mexico plays a very high-tempo, vertical 4-1-2-3 system.
Meaning Mexico is basically structured to sprint straight up the middle of the field in waves, overloading the attacking zones with speed.
Precisely. They are built to overwhelm. Now, if you are Czechia and you invite that much pressure deep into your own half, you desperately need an outlet.
Right, you need somewhere to send the ball.
Exactly. When your defenders finally win the ball back, they need a target man, a big physical forward they can kick the ball up to, who can just hold onto it and let the team breathe.
And that's usually Patrick Schick.
Right. Patrick Schick is a 6'4" elite target man, and Tomáš Souček is the engine who transitions the ball. By benching them both, Kubek removed his own escape hatch.
They built a wall, but forgot to build a door.
That is the perfect way to put it. They were trapped. Every time Czechia won the ball, they had literally no one to pass it forward to.
Wow.
They just passed it horizontally along their own defensive line until Mexico's defensive midfielder, Luis Romo, would trigger a counterpress.
Meaning Mexico immediately swarmed the ball the second they lost it.
Yep. Czechia got suffocated by their own tactical rigidity. And historically, the AI models pointed out Czechia hasn't beaten Mexico since 1961, back when they were Czechoslovakia.
Jeez.
So that tactical stubbornness just made Mexico look completely invincible.
Which brings us to the actual individuals executing this historic win, because this is where the traditional sporting rulebook really gets thrown out the window. The two most astonishing roster details for Mexico in this match completely defy logic.
You really do.
First, you have Gilberto Mora, a 17-year-old kid born in October 2008. He is the youngest player at the 2026 tournament and the sixth youngest starter in the entire history of the World Cup.
And he's tiny, right? He is 5'6" and incredibly slight, but he completely dictated the rhythm of the midfield.
Yeah, he was fearless.
The match reports highlighted this specific moment where Mora took the ball with the outside of his right foot, spun effortlessly away from heavy traffic, and just accelerated.
Oh, the analysts were going crazy with that.
They were comparing his touch and his low center of gravity gait directly to Lionel Messi. When he was subbed off in the 72nd minute, the Azteca gave him a massive standing ovation.
And then, just 6 minutes later, Javier Aguirre makes a substitution that spans an entire generation. In the 78th minute, he brings on legendary goalkeeper Guillermo Ochoa, a man who is 40 years old, stepping onto the pitch to play in his 6th World Cup.
Which is just rarefied air.
Completely. Playing in 6 World Cups is a milestone shared only by Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. He is only the 7th player over 40 to ever feature in a World Cup match.
And managing that locker room dynamic requires incredible psychological nuance. I mean, you have a team relying simultaneously on a player who has vivid memories of the 2006 World Cup and a player who is literally not alive yet.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Playing a 17-year-old prodigy alongside a 40-year-old veteran is like putting a Gen Z TikTok influencer and a dial-up internet pioneer on the same tech panel.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Think about it. The dial-up pioneer understands the deep underlying infrastructure, right? If the server crashes, they know exactly why. That allows the Gen Z influencer to completely ignore the technical backend and just focus purely on creating brilliant content. But how does a soccer team actually balance that kind of extreme generational gap on the biggest stage in the world?
It all comes down to cognitive load. And your analogy maps perfectly onto how the human brain processes high-stress environments.
Okay, break that down for us.
So in cognitive psychology, there is System 1 thinking, which is fast, instinctual, and automatic. And there is System 2 thinking, which is slow, deliberate, and analytical. Gilberto Mora, the 17-year-old, is operating entirely on System 1.
So he's just playing purely on instinct.
Right. He is playing with this fearless, unburdened freedom. He doesn't carry the baggage of past tournament failures.
He's just out there creating the content.
Exactly. But you can only play with that kind of mechanist, instinctual freedom if someone else is managing the System 2 cognitive load.
Ah, and that is Guillermo Ochoa.
Yes. The 40-year-old brings this immense anchoring calm. He has seen literally every possible tactical permutation a football pitch can offer. He recognizes the patterns of the game before they even happen.
So Aguirre brought Ochoa on when the game was already secure.
Right. The younger players provided the intense physical engine, and Ochoa provided the infrastructural stability. When Ochoa kneeled on the pitch at the final whistle, the entire team embraced him. It wasn't a fractured locker room of old versus young. It was just a perfect synthesis.
The Fox Sports report captured that synthesis beautifully. They described the atmosphere at the Azteca for Ochoa and Mora as a, quote, vibrant, feel-good, extremely joyous party. They basically called it a festival of joy.
A festival of joy, yeah.
And holding on to that specific idea, this intentional festival of joy provides the perfect bridge to our other sources today. Because joy and celebration aren't just changing how fans experience a stadium anymore. They are fundamentally rewiring the economics of a multi-billion-dollar media industry off the pitch.
Oh, 100%. The revolution happening in sports media right now is entirely driven by that exact same desire for joy, inclusivity, and community.
Because the old model was so aggressive.
Exactly. The traditional gatekeepers assumed fans only wanted aggressive debate. But the explosive rise of women's sports podcasts proves otherwise. We are looking at a global podcast market estimated to be worth between $25 and $30 billion.
That is massive.
Yeah.
And within that huge ecosystem, the Sports Business Journal recently tracked over 80 prominent women's sports shows. The stat that just jumps right off the page for me. Nearly 72% of those shows launched just since the start of 2024.
It is a complete gold rush.
Totally. You have Vox Media launching A Touch More with soccer legend Megan Rapinoe and Basketball Hall of Famer Sue Bird. Deep Blue Sports launched Good Game, which is the very first daily women's sports show hosted by Sarah Spain.
And Men in Blazers brought in former U.S. women's national team star Sam Mewis to run the women's game.
Right. But to really grasp the magnitude of this shift, you have to look at what these women had to endure to get here.
Oh, absolutely.
The sources included a retrospective discussion from The Overlap featuring Kelly Cates, Christine Lampard, and Haley McQueen. And they detailed what sports broadcasting was actually like for women 20 years ago.
It was a systemically hostile environment.
Extremely hostile. A woman on a sports broadcast back then was explicitly expected to just be decorative. Their actual sports knowledge was treated as completely irrelevant.
Yeah, there was this one story Kelly Cates told that just perfectly encapsulates the psychological isolation of that era.
Oh, the pitch side presentation story.
Yes. So she is doing a pitch side presentation with two male pundits, and right before they go live, the producer tells the two men to answer the first question and then literally walk away from her.
Just leave her there.
Right, to just walk down the tunnel, continuing their conversation for the camera. And the Steadicam operator follows the men, leaving Kelly just awkwardly standing in the background of the shot.
Holding her microphone.
Exactly, completely abandoned by her own broadcast.
And the underlying cruelty of a moment like that is how the public reacts to it. The tabloids and early social media immediately weaponized that image. They spun narratives that the men were actively disrespecting her or, that she was somehow incompetent and just didn't belong in the conversation.
Women in that space were constantly subjected to that kind of manufactured paranoia. The industry actively pitted them against each other, swirling rumors about who was trying to steal whose job.
Just divide and conquer.
Yep. It was an environment designed to keep them marginalized and compliant.
But flash forward to today, and those marginalized figures are now the architects of their own media empires. Former female athletes aren't asking for a seat at the traditional network desk anymore. They've got the lumber and built their own table.
That's exactly what they did.
And the demographics they are pulling in are fascinating. The audience for these independent shows skews 77% female, with an average age of just 29.
And that is an incredibly powerful demographic. I mean, the 29-year-old female listener is a primary driver of household purchasing decisions.
Which explains the sponsors.
Oh, totally. That is why brands like Zillow, Adidas, Delta, and Google Pixel are pouring heavy sponsorship dollars into these podcasts and their live events. Historically, mainstream television devoted roughly 4% of their coverage to women's sports.
4%, that's nothing.
Right. It recently crept up closer to 15%, but that is still a massive market inefficiency.
So what does this all mean for the traditional sports media giants like ESPN or Fox Sports? I mean, if 72% of these women-led shows launched just since 2024, are these independent podcasts just filling a massive void the big networks actively ignored, or have they created an entirely new genre of sports entertainment?
They've engineered an entirely new genre, period. And it operates on a fundamentally different emotional register. If Megan Rapinoe or Sarah Spain had simply copied the traditional sports radio format, the table pounding, the yelling, the manufactured hot takes.
It would have crashed and burned.
Exactly. It would have failed. They recognized that this massive untapped audience of 29-year-old women didn't just want coverage of different sports. They wanted a different feeling when consuming sports.
Which brings us to the psychological mechanism driving this whole revolution. There's a brilliant quote in the sources from Emma Hayes, the coach of the U.S. women's national team.
Oh, I love this quote.
It's so good. She said that traditional men's sports media often relies heavily on, cortisol stress, anger, aggressive debate. But women's sports media is built on dopamine. It's built on joy, inclusivity, and community.
The cortisol versus dopamine framework perfectly explains the underlying neurochemistry of media consumption. Traditional sports talk radio is adversarial by design. The hosts literally need to find an enemy to keep you engaged.
Like a referee who blew a call.
Right, or a rival team, or a manager who used the wrong tactics. That conflict spikes your cortisol levels. It makes you tense. These new podcasts, however, foster a parasocial environment. The dopamine hit comes from feeling like you are part of a community.
And you see that community building in the actual content of the shows. Rapinoe and Bird have that recurring segment on their show called The Bicker of the Week.
Yes.
It's not about screening at an athlete. It's just a humorous, self-deprecating look at their own relationship as a couple. Or look at Sarah Speen's Daily Show. Her fans organically started calling themselves slices, like the orange slices you get at halftime of a youth soccer game.
Their slices phenomenon is the perfect example of dopamine media. It is inherently welcoming. And when these hosts take their shows on the road, the economic power of that joy becomes undeniable.
Live shows are huge.
Massive. During the WNBA All-Star Weekend in Indianapolis, the live podcast events had lines stretching out the door. These live shows function as safe, highly inclusive physical spaces, particularly for queer and female fans who spent decades feeling alienated or, honestly, unsafe in traditional hyper-masculine sports bars.
Yeah, they show up in custom merchandise, they're laughing with strangers, they feel seen. And the brilliance of the business model is what happens after the live show. The hosts take these moments of authentic, joyful banter and chop them up into 30-second clips for TikTok and Instagram.
And that social media strategy completely solves the discovery problem. You might not commit to a full hour-long audio podcast if you're just a casual fan.
Right.
But if you are scrolling on your phone and you see a 30-second clip of Caitlin Clark showing up as a surprise guest and joking around about a life-size butter sculpture of herself.
Which actually happened at the Iowa State Fair.
Right, which actually happened. You get an immediate hit of dopamine, you laugh, you feel connected, and that 30-second clip funnels you right into the broader podcast ecosystem.
That cortisol versus dopamine idea is spot on. It's the difference between being trapped in a room with political talk radio where everyone is just waiting for their turn to yell versus hanging out at a really great dinner party where the conversation actually flows.
That's exactly it.
So are we seeing the aggressive, table-pounding sports debate format finally becoming obsolete?
Well, cortisol will never be completely obsolete because stress and outrage are highly addictive human emotions. There will always be a profitable market for debate.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. But what this podcast boom proves is that the cortisol model is no longer the only viable business model. For 50 years, media executives assumed that if there wasn't screaming, there wasn't engagement.
And they were totally wrong.
Completely wrong. These women are proving that joy and community can be monetized to the tune of billions of dollars. They aren't stealing the traditional audience. They are expanding the pie by bringing in people who were previously repelled by the product.
When you step back and look at the sheer scale of the changes we've unpacked today, it's clear the old gatekeepers are just losing their grip. The traditional rulebook is being rewritten right in front of us.
The through line is a total rejection of the phrase, "That's how we've always done it."
Yes. Whether it's the Mexican national team redefining historical limits by leaning on a 17-year-old kid and a 40-year-old legend to achieve a flawless World Cup group stage.
Or female broadcasters evolving from marginalized decorative figures in the background of a shot into the architects of a $30 billion media empire.
Right. The rigid barriers are falling because people are finally realizing that outdated systems like benching your best players to protect a stubborn defensive formation or forcing female analysts to act like combative male shock jocks, they only guarantee failure.
The ultimate lesson from both the pitch and the podcast studio is that adaptability and joy are highly effective strategies. When you build a system that allows people to operate without unnecessary cognitive load, whether that's a Gen Z teenager expressing himself freely with a soccer ball, or a female broadcaster speaking her truth into a microphone without fear of isolation, the results are exponentially better.
And as a learner, that is why this matters to you. True innovation happens when you stop playing by the old rules and start intentionally bringing in diverse voices and fresh perspectives.
Absolutely.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering question to ponder as you go about your week. If the most successful modern sports teams and the fastest-growing media properties are the ones intentionally choosing joy, inclusivity and dopamine over rigid tradition and hostility. What other heavily guarded traditional industries in our society are secretly ripe for a dopamine revolution of their own? Think about those unwritten rules in your own world, just waiting for someone to build a new table.
The blueprint is out there.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.